Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. It all started on a gray Thursday morning in New York City. Rain pressed softly against the tall windows of Cole Enterprises, tracing lines like veins of time itself. Inside the boardroom, every seat was filled, yet silence ruled. At the head of the long glass table sat Ethan Cole, 34, sharp suit, colder eyes. His mother had been buried less than a week ago, and now the lawyers were dividing what was left of her legacy. Ethan's hand clenched around the old pocket watch lying beside the will. The watch had once belonged to his mother, the only thing she truly cared about, but it had stopped ticking on the day she died. He had taken it apart himself, tried to fix it, but nothing worked. The attorney cleared his throat, breaking the heavy quiet. Mr. Cole, as per your mother's final request, her estate and company remain under your control on one condition. You must marry within 30 days. The room buzzed. Ethan's jaw tightened. This is ridiculous, he muttered. My mother knew I had no intention of marrying. The lawyer did not flinch. Nevertheless, it is legally binding. If you fail to comply, control of the company transfers to the board. Ethan's chest burned. He had built this empire with his own hands, and now it could slip away because of a sentence in a will written by a woman who had always believed he was too lonely for his own good. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the marble floor. Meeting adjourned, he said, leaving the room without looking back. The rain hit harder outside, drenching the city as if the sky itself mourned. Hours later, Ethan found himself standing before a small repair shop tucked between two coffee houses on Lexington Avenue. The faded sign read, Tran Timepieces. Inside, hundreds of clocks lined the walls, each one ticking softly in perfect rhythm, except for the broken pocket watch in his hand. Behind the counter stood Lila Tran, mid-20s, brown hair in a loose bun, magnifying glasses perched on her head. She looked up from a clock mechanism and smiled politely. How can I help you? Ethan hesitated, his voice low. It belonged to my mother. It stopped on the day she died. Can you make it work again? Lila took the watch gently, studying the delicate gears inside. It is not broken, she said softly. It is just tired. Some things only need patience to start again. Her words hit him deeper than he expected. He watched as her slender fingers adjusted the mechanism, a faint click echoing in the small shop. Suddenly, the second hand twitched. Then ticked. Then kept ticking. Ethan stared, breath caught. How did you do that? She smiled. Sometimes time only moves when someone believes it can. Outside, the storm began to ease, light cutting through the clouds. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, something shifting quietly inside him. And that was when the impossible idea struck a way to save everything, at least on paper. He straightened, voice calm but deliberate. Miss Tran, how would you like to make $500,000? She blinked, taken aback. Excuse me? Ethan met her gaze. Marry me. Think of it as a contract. 6 months. No strings attached. The ticking clock between them filled the silence, marking the beginning of a deal that would restart not just his inheritance but his heart. For a long second, Lila just stared at him, wondering if she had heard him correctly. Marry you, she repeated, her voice caught between disbelief and laughter. Ethan did not smile. His tone stayed level, calm, almost businesslike. Yes. A legal marriage. 6 months. You will be paid $500,000 at the end. You will live in my house, attend several public events with me, and when it is over, you can walk away with your life changed. It is not personal. It is a contract. The ticking clocks around them filled the silence. Lila shook her head. That sounds absurd. Why would you ask a stranger to marry you? Ethan met her eyes. Because you fixed something that I could not. You do not want my money. You did not even know who I was. That is exactly why I can trust you. His voice carried that familiar edge of control, but behind it there was exhaustion, something quietly human. Lila placed the pocket watch between them again. You should think carefully before turning marriage into a business deal, Mr. Cole. He gave a small shrug. Believe me, Miss Tran, I already have. He slid a business card across the counter. You have until midnight tomorrow. If you say no, I will not bother you again. And then he left, the bell over the door chiming as he disappeared into the rain. That night, Lila sat in her small apartment above the shop, listening to the faint ticking of the clocks below. Bills were piled on the table beside her untouched dinner. The landlord had given her one more week before eviction. Her father's old tools were rusting, her mother's photo fading in its frame. $500,000 could save everything: the shop, her home, her dignity. But a fake marriage? She ran her fingers over the pocket watch she had repaired, feeling the pulse of time in her palm. Some things only need patience to start again, she whispered, repeating her own words from earlier, and for the first time they sounded like a warning. The next morning, she was back at the shop early, sweeping the floor when the glass door opened. Ethan stood there, dry this time, in a dark coat and gray scarf, holding 2 coffees. You have thought about it, he said, more as a statement than a question. Lila hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yes. But I have conditions of my own. He raised an eyebrow. I am listening. 6 months. You respect my privacy. No public affection unless necessary. And when it ends, you fund a repair program for small family-owned shops like mine. Ethan's lips curved slightly, almost a smile. You drive a hard bargain. Do we have a deal or not? She asked, crossing her arms. He set one of the coffees on the counter. Deal. The next week was a blur. Lawyers drafted papers, photographers arranged a quiet civil ceremony, and tabloids caught whispers of the mystery bride. Lila wore a simple ivory dress, her hair loose, the old pocket watch tucked into her bouquet as her secret charm. Ethan stood beside her in a navy suit, expression unreadable as the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. There were no kisses, no applause, just the click of the camera shutter and the sound of rain easing outside. Afterward, he offered his arm politely. Shall we? She looked at him, the contract folded in her purse, her heart strangely heavy. You are really going through with this, she said quietly. I have never broken a contract, he replied. They left the courthouse together, 2 strangers bound by paper and time. The black car waiting outside gleamed under the streetlights. As it pulled away, Lila glanced out the window at her shop fading into the distance. The clocks inside would keep ticking without her. But in the reflection of the glass, she caught Ethan's gaze. For the first time, there was something uncertain in his eyes, something almost like hope. And though neither of them knew it yet, the moment the car turned the corner, both of their lives had already begun to change. The mansion felt less like a home and more like a museum. As Lila stepped through the grand doors for the first time, she was greeted by silence so deep it echoed. Marble floors gleamed under her feet, portraits of stern ancestors watched from the walls, and the faint scent of cedar lingered in the air. A woman in a black uniform approached, posture stiff, eyes assessing. Mrs. Cole, I am Margaret, the head housekeeper. Mr. Cole's instructions are that you will stay in the East Wing. Dinner is served at 7. Formal attire. The word Mrs. Cole still felt strange, heavy, unreal. Lila managed a polite nod. Thank you. Ethan appeared at the top of the stairs, sharp as ever in a gray vest and white shirt. Margaret will assist you with whatever you need, he said, his tone efficient, impersonal. Our schedule starts tomorrow. First event is a charity auction downtown. The media will be there, so we must look convincing. Lila looked up at him, her voice steady. Convincing. Right. He studied her a moment longer, then walked away without another word. That night, she explored the East Wing. The room was large, immaculate, but cold. There was a vanity with golden trim, a bed big enough for a queen, and a window overlooking the gardens that glowed faintly under the moonlight. She set her small suitcase down and took out the pocket watch, placing it on the nightstand. Its ticking filled the emptiness. She whispered to herself, half a year. Just 6 months. At 7 sharp, she entered the dining room. The table was long enough to seat 20, but only 2 places were set. Ethan sat at the far end, scrolling through his tablet. Crystal chandeliers reflected on the polished wood between them. You can sit, he said without looking up. She took the seat across, the silence almost painful. The soup was warm but flavorless. She broke it first. Your mother loved clocks, did she not? His eyes flicked up. She did. She said time was the only thing money could not buy. She was right, Lila replied softly. His gaze lingered for a beat before dropping back to the screen. You have a busy week, he said. Stylist, media training, 3 public events. She blinked. Media training? For what? You are a CEO's wife now. You will be expected to act like one. The words cut sharper than he probably intended. She smiled faintly. Then I guess I should start practicing my smile. The corner of his mouth almost curved. Almost. Days passed quickly after that. Her life became a montage of fittings, lessons, and interviews. Margaret arranged wardrobes, publicists rehearsed introductions, and Ethan's assistant, Ryan, handed her schedules thicker than a novel. Lila learned how to pose for photos, how to answer shallow questions about their love story, and how to stand beside Ethan at events without ever truly touching him. At the charity auction, she wore a sleek black gown that hugged her waist and sparkled under the lights. As cameras flashed, Ethan leaned closer and whispered, "Remember, hand on my arm. Smile but not too wide." She did exactly that, her expression calm, composed, even when the whispers started. Who is she? He married her that fast? Probably another social climber. Lila heard every word, but she kept her smile. Then one of the guests, a man in his 50s with a mocking grin, approached Ethan. Cole, your taste has improved. Finally picked someone easy on the eyes, huh? The laughter around them was low and cruel. Lila's heart raced, but before she could react, Ethan's voice cut through, cold and deliberate. You are speaking about my wife. Watch your tone. The room fell quiet. The man muttered an apology and walked away. Lila turned to Ethan, stunned. He simply straightened his tie and said, People mistake silence for weakness. I prefer they do not. For the first time, she saw something in him that was not arrogance but a strange kind of loyalty. Later that night, as the car drove them back, the city lights streaked across the windows. Lila finally spoke. Thank you for what you said back there. Ethan's eyes stayed on the skyline. You did not deserve that. Neither did you, she said quietly. He turned his head slightly, a hint of a smile in the dark reflection. Get used to it. We will give them plenty to talk about. The watch in her purse ticked softly as if agreeing. Outside, the city kept moving, unaware that somewhere inside a black limousine, 2 strangers pretending to be husband and wife had just shared their first moment of truth. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of their strange marriage began to take shape. Every morning, Ethan left early for the office while Lila spent her hours learning the unspoken rules of his world. She met designers, attended charity brunches, and quietly observed how everyone smiled too wide and spoke too carefully. Her name began appearing in society columns next to his, labeled the mysterious new Mrs. Cole. At first, she hated it. But slowly, she learned how to survive behind that polished smile. One afternoon, while reviewing event invitations with Margaret, a courier arrived with a velvet box. Inside was a necklace of white gold and sapphires. The note attached read, "Wear this tonight." Lila frowned. She had not expected him to notice what she would wear, much less care. That evening, she descended the staircase in a deep blue gown, the necklace gleaming softly against her skin. Ethan looked up from his cufflinks, and for a moment, his usual composure faltered. "It suits you," he said simply. "Thank you," she replied, and though it was just 2 words, something shifted in the air between them. The charity dinner was held in a hotel ballroom downtown, filled with glittering lights, music, and laughter. Lila stood beside Ethan as photographers circled like bees. She smiled, posed, and nodded politely as investors and board members greeted them. One older woman leaned in and whispered, "You are even more graceful than the magazines said." Lila smiled. "Thank you. But magazines always exaggerate." Ethan almost laughed. Almost. During the dinner, speeches droned on, and Lila's mind wandered. On the stage, a host introduced the evening's highlight, a live auction for the company's foundation, dedicated to funding community schools. Ethan's mother had started it years ago. As the host called for Ethan to speak, he hesitated, then surprised everyone by nodding toward Lila. "My wife will speak for us." The microphone was suddenly in her hand, the spotlight blinding. A hush spread through the room. She took a breath, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes. Then she remembered the ticking of the pocket watch at home, steady and brave. "Good evening," she began. "This foundation began with one woman's belief that time is the most valuable thing we can give. Tonight, we are not just bidding with money. We are bidding with minutes of our Lavesto make someone else's future brighter. Time, after all, is the only thing we cannot buy back." For a moment, silence. Then applause thundered through the hall. Cameras flashed. Ethan watched her from the table, his expression unreadable but his eyes softer than she had ever seen them. Later that night, back at the mansion, he handed her a glass of wine. "You handled yourself well," he said. "You made them listen." "I was only saying what I felt," she replied. He studied her for a long time before speaking again. "You remind me of her. My mother. She spoke about time the same way." Lila smiled faintly. "Maybe that is why the watch started working again." His gaze drifted to the fireplace. She believed in small miracles. The air between them quieted, comfortable for once. Then Ethan said, almost to himself, "You are not what I expected." "Neither are you," she answered softly. For a few seconds, neither spoke. The clock above the mantel ticked steadily, and something unspoken grew in that silence, something neither of them dared to name. The next morning, the world outside felt different. Reporters praised her speech. Magazines called them the perfect power couple. But behind closed doors, Lila could feel a tension she could not explain. Ethan had become more thoughtful, more present. He lingered at breakfast, asked about her day, even smiled sometimes. And one evening, when she burned a batch of cookies in the kitchen, he appeared in his rolled-up sleeves, laughing quietly as he helped clean up the mess. "You are a terrible baker," he teased. She looked up at him, covered in flour. "You are not much better at pretending you do not care," she said. His laughter faded, replaced by that same uncertain warmth she had seen before. For a moment, the air felt charged, fragile. Then he stepped back, clearing his throat. "We should not forget what this is," he said. "A contract." "Right," she whispered, even as her heart disagreed. Outside, the wind brushed against the windows, and somewhere inside the house, a clock began to chime. Each note echoed softly, as if reminding them both that time once broken was ticking again. Autumn arrived quietly, painting the city in gold and rust. Lila had grown used to the rhythm of the mansion, but she could not ignore the way Ethan's presence had begun to shift around her. He still spoke in measured tones and carried himself like a man carved from glass, but sometimes his guard slipped. He would ask if she had eaten, if she was sleeping well, if she needed anything for her workshop corner in the East Wing where she had started repairing watches again. Those moments unsettled her more than his coldness ever did. One evening, Ethan invited her to a corporate gala, a grand event hosted by the Cole Foundation to announce a new scholarship fund. The ballroom glowed under chandeliers, and a soft hum of conversation filled the air. Cameras waited. They stepped onto the carpet together, hand in hand, smiling just enough for the flash. Inside, board members greeted Ethan with practiced warmth. "Cole, good to see you. And this must be your wife. Lovely to finally meet the woman who tamed you." The words were teasing, but the tone was probing. Lila answered politely, her composure flawless. She had learned to survive this world of champagne and shallow charm. As dinner began, Ethan leaned over and said quietly, "Stay close to me tonight. Some people here see kindness as weakness." She nodded, her eyes following his across the room to a group of men whispering at a corner table. Halfway through the evening, the host announced a surprise presentation and award dedicated to Ethan's late mother for her contribution to the foundation. Lila felt his hand stiffen. He had not expected it. As applause rose, the host invited Lila to join Ethan on stage. She hesitated, but his silent nod told her it was all right. Standing under the bright lights, she could feel his tension. When the host handed her the microphone, Lila spoke from the heart. This foundation was born from compassion. And while money builds walls, compassion builds bridges. Tonight, we honor not only a legacy, but a reminder that love is the one currency that never loses its value. The crowd erupted in applause. Ethan looked at her, pride and grief blending in his eyes. But as they stepped off stage, flashes exploded. A reporter shouted, "Mrs. Cole. Is it true your marriage was arranged as part of a contract?" The question sliced through the noise like glass. Lila froze. Ethan's arm tightened around her, his voice slow and controlled. "That is enough." But the damage was done. The whispers began to swell. By the time they reached the limousine, his phone was buzzing with calls. Inside the car, silence thickened between them. "Do not worry," he said finally, his tone clipped. "I will handle it." Lila turned to him, her voice trembling. "Ethan, what did they mean by contract? How would they even know?" His jaw locked. "Someone leaked it. But I will find out who." "It does not matter who," she said, her throat tightening. "It matters that it is true." He looked at her sharply. "You knew what this was." "I did," she whispered. "But it did not have to feel this empty." They said nothing else the entire ride home. That night, she could not sleep. The headlines exploded online, the CEO's secret deal, marriage for money or power? Her phone filled with messages she did not open. When Ethan's office door closed the next morning, she packed a single suitcase. Before leaving, she placed the pocket watch on the nightstand, its ticking steady for the first time since she had arrived. A note lay beside it, "Some things can be fixed only once." By the time Ethan returned home, the room was empty. The watch sat there, still beating, as if counting down to something he had not yet realized he was losing. He stood there for a long time, the echo of her words in his mind. For the first time in years, the house felt alive and dead all at once. He reached for the watch and held it tightly, the sound of its ticking louder than his own heartbeat. And in that moment, he finally understood love, like time, was never meant to be controlled. Days turned into weeks, and the headlines eventually faded, but the silence inside the mansion remained. Ethan threw himself into work, spending long hours behind closed doors, ignoring the quiet emptiness that followed him everywhere. The East Wing felt colder without her laughter, without the faint sound of ticking clocks from her corner. The pocket watch sat on his desk, still running, its rhythmic beat mocking him. Ryan, his assistant, finally broke the silence one afternoon. "Sir, the board wants to know if you plan to make a public statement." Ethan did not look up from his papers. "Tell them to focus on profits, not gossip." Ryan hesitated. "With all due respect, sir, this is not just gossip. People are questioning your integrity." Ethan's pen froze. My integrity is not for sale. But even as he said it, he heard the hollowness in his own voice. That night, he returned to the empty dining room. The table was still set for two, untouched since the gala. He sat down, staring at the opposite chair as if she might walk in again. Instead, he heard only the ticking of the watch in his pocket. Finally, he stood and went upstairs, opening the door to the east wing. Her workbench was still there, covered with small tools, screwdrivers, magnifying lenses, and an unfinished clock she had been restoring. The minute hand was missing. He picked it up carefully, his thumb brushing over the faint engraving on the back, "Time heals." The words hit him harder than he expected. He whispered to the empty room, "Then why does it still hurt?" Across town, Lila had returned to her small shop on Lexington Avenue. Life was quieter now, predictable, but empty in ways she did not want to admit. She worked long hours repairing watches, her hands steady even when her heart was not. Customers came and went, yet she could not stop glancing at the door, half expecting him to appear. One rainy afternoon, she received a package with no return address. Inside was a familiar pocket watch, her father's this time, that she had lost years ago during a move. It had been cleaned, polished, repaired. A note was tucked inside, written in neat handwriting she recognized instantly. "Some things deserve a second chance." Her hands trembled as she read it. The next morning, Ethan arrived at his office early. Ryan followed him in, holding a tablet. "Sir, about the leak. We found the source." It was Mason Gray, the former head of PR. He sold the information to the tabloids. Ethan's eyes darkened. "Fire him immediately and pursue legal action." "Already done," Ryan said. "But sir, there is more. He also falsified reports connected to the foundation. The embezzlement traces back to him." Ethan closed his eyes, realization settling in. The scandal that had ruined Lila's name had never been her fault. It was his world's rot, not hers. He stood abruptly. "Prepare a statement. Public. Today." Hours later, his live address aired on every business network. The backdrop was simple, no luxury, no gloss, just Ethan standing before the camera. "I have built my career on control," he said, voice steady. "But I learned that control means nothing if it costs you honesty, or love. The rumors about my marriage were based on truth, but the truth is incomplete. Lila Tran entered my life through a contract, yes, but she left it as the only person who ever reminded me what integrity actually means. For that, I owe her more than any company could repay." The broadcast went viral. By nightfall, thousands of comments flooded the foundation's page, praising his courage, demanding justice for Lila. At the same time, she sat in her shop, watching the speech on her small TV. When it ended, she turned off the screen and stared at the pocket watch in her hand. It was ticking again, clear and strong. For the first time in weeks, she smiled a quiet, trembling smile. Somewhere in the city, Ethan stood by his window, the skyline glittering beneath the rain. He glanced at the watch in his hand and whispered, "Tick for me, just a little longer." And for the first time since she left, he felt that maybe time had not abandoned him completely. Winter settled over New York like a gray blanket, quiet and unrelenting. The scandal had faded, replaced by newer headlines, but the distance between Ethan and Lila felt larger than ever. He had spoken his truth in front of the world, but she had not answered. Each day he waited for a call, a message, even a sign that she had heard him, but none came. Meanwhile, her shop thrived again. Customers returned, drawn by word of mouth and the curiosity surrounding the woman who had once been married to one of the city's most powerful men. Lila worked tirelessly, losing herself in the rhythm of gears and ticking hands, but every time a pocket watch clicked back to life, she thought of him. One snowy morning, as she was opening the store, the doorbell chimed. She looked up and froze. Standing there, dressed in a dark coat dusted with snow, was Ethan. He looked different, less polished, more human. "You should not be here," she said softly. "You have a reputation to rebuild." He smiled faintly. I think I already did. I just forgot to rebuild the part that matters. She hesitated but stepped aside. He entered quietly, glancing around at the shelves filled with clocks. The air smelled of oil and cedar. You kept the place alive, he said. It feels like time itself breathes here. Lila crossed her arms, steadying herself. Why are you here, Ethan? He reached into his pocket and pulled out the watch she had left behind in the mansion. Because I never gave this back. And because I wanted to tell you in person I am sorry. She looked at the watch, then at him. Sorry does not fix everything. No, he admitted. But it is a start. He stepped closer, his voice lower now. You once said some things can only be fixed once. Maybe I ruined our chance. But if there is still time, even a little, I want to try again. The sincerity in his tone disarmed her more than the words themselves. You think you can just walk back in and start over? She asked, her voice trembling. No, he said. I think I can wait until you are ready to let me. For a long moment, they stood there, the sound of ticking filling the small room. Then Lila picked up a small clock from the counter and placed it between them. This one has been stuck for weeks, she said quietly. If you can make it tick again, maybe you will have your answer. Ethan took the clock carefully, his hands trembling slightly as he examined it. After a minute, a soft click broke the silence. The second hand began to move. Lila's breath caught. He looked up at her, a faint smile touching his lips. Looks like it just needed a little patience, he said. Her eyes glistened, though she quickly looked away. You always did have good timing, she whispered. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the city in white. For the first time in a long while, neither of them spoke. They just stood there, surrounded by the soft, steady rhythm of time returning to life. For the next few weeks, Ethan began visiting the shop every evening after closing hours. He never came as the CEO of Cole Enterprises, only as a man who wanted to understand what he had lost. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they worked in silence, the only sound between them the delicate ticking of clocks being reborn. Slowly, the ice between them began to thaw. Lila noticed small changes: how he would roll up his sleeves without hesitation, how he would laugh quietly when a clock chimed offbeat, how he would bring her coffee without asking how she liked it. One night, as they were repairing an antique wall clock, she asked, "Do you ever miss it? The mansion, the meetings, the noise?" Ethan thought for a moment before answering. "I used to think success meant never stopping. But the more I chased time, the more I lost it. Maybe this," he gestured around the small workshop, "is what real time feels like." Lila smiled faintly. "You sound like my father. He used to say, time is not money, time is memory." Ethan looked at her, his voice soft. "Then I hope I am not too late to make new ones with you." Her heart skipped, but before she could reply, the shop door opened suddenly. A camera flash exploded, followed by a reporter shouting, "Ethan Cole. Are you back together with your ex-wife?" The sound startled them both. Ethan immediately stepped in front of Lila, shielding her from the chaos as more flashes burst through the doorway. "Leave," he said firmly, his voice like steel. "You have no right to be here." The reporters hesitated, but he did not move. His body blocked the camera, his tone unshakable. "This is private property. Get out." They left, muttering, the bell over the door clanging violently as it closed. Lila exhaled shakily, her pulse racing. "You did not have to do that," she said. "Yes, I did," he replied. "I promised you once I would protect you, and I meant it. I will not let them turn you into a headline again." She looked at him for a long moment. "You cannot control everything, Ethan." "I know," he said quietly. "But I can control how I stand by you this time." Later that week, the foundation held its annual charity exhibition in honor of his mother. Ethan asked Lila to attend as his guest, not his contract wife, but the woman who had inspired the foundation's revival. At first she hesitated, but when he revealed that the event would showcase the Time Heals community program she had helped design, she agreed. The night of the event, the city glimmered under the winter lights. The hall was filled with restored clocks donated from families across the city, each one repaired by local craftsmen trained through Lila's program. When Ethan took the stage, the audience fell silent. "Tonight," he said, "we are not celebrating wealth or legacy. We are celebrating the people who remind us that time, when shared, becomes healing." Then he turned toward Lila in the crowd. "And one person taught me that better than anyone." The lights shifted, revealing the centerpiece, a restored pocket watch encased in glass, ticking steadily. The plaque beneath it read, "Restarted by Lila Tran." The audience erupted in applause as she stood there, her eyes wide, tears glimmering. Ethan stepped down from the stage and approached her slowly. "This is not about the past," he said softly. "It is about what time we have left, and who we choose to spend it with." Lila's voice shook. "And who do you choose, Ethan?" He smiled gently. "You, if you will have me." The applause faded around them until all she could hear was the familiar, steady ticking of a clock marking the moment their time began again. Spring arrived with soft sunlight spilling through the windows of Tran timepieces. The city outside buzzed with new beginnings, and inside the little shop, every clock ticked in perfect harmony. It had been 3 months since the night of the charity gala, 3 months since Ethan had stood before the world and chosen her. Now, the rhythm of their days was quiet but full: morning coffee, laughter over repairs, shared glances that said more than words ever could. Lila no longer called him Mr. Cole, he was just Ethan, the man who had learned to slow down. On a calm afternoon, she was polishing the glass of a restored grandfather clock when the bell above the door chimed. Ethan stepped in, wearing a gray suit and holding a small velvet box in his hand. "You are early," she said with a smile. "The clocks are still working fine." "I know," he replied, his eyes warm. "But there is one thing I have yet to fix." He walked toward her slowly, stopping beside the workbench where their story had begun. He opened the box to reveal a silver pocket watch, his mother's watch, the same one she had repaired on the day they met. Only now, the engraving on the back was new. It read, "Our time." Lila's breath caught. "Ethan," he took her hand, placing the watch gently into her palm. "You restarted my mother's time, and somehow you restarted mine too. So this time, no contracts, no deadlines, just us." Her eyes filled with tears, her voice barely a whisper. "Are you sure?" "Completely," he said. "Because for the first time in my life, I am not afraid of time passing. I am afraid of it running out without you." The room fell silent except for the soft ticking surrounding them, hundreds of clocks keeping witness. Then, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, he knelt down and opened the box again, this time revealing a simple diamond ring. "Lila Tran," he said, voice steady but full of emotion, "will you marry me for real, and not because of a contract, but because I cannot imagine a single hour without you in it?" Tears rolled down her cheeks as she nodded. "Yes, Ethan. 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and the clocks in the room seemed to chime all at once, as if blessing their promise. Later that evening, they stood by the shop window, watching the sun dip behind the skyline. Ethan wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "You know," he murmured, "I used to think love was something that cost time. But maybe love is what gives it back." Lila leaned against him, smiling. "Then let us never stop time again." The camera of the world outside would one day call it the most unexpected love story. A billionaire and a clockmaker who taught each other that time, once lost, can still be found. But to them, it was simpler than that. It was just two hearts ticking in sync, one promise made not in paper or wealth, but in time itself. And as the night settled, the last sound heard from Tran timepieces was the steady, eternal rhythm of a love that would never stop ticking.